Welcome back to my channel, Official History of Coins. Pull up a chair and get comfortable, because today we're going to talk about a coin that might already be sitting in a forgotten jar on your dresser or buried under a pile of receipts in your car's cup holder. First up, it's the 1916 United States Buffalo nickel, also known as the Indian head nickel. And at first glance, it looks like nothing special. In fact, most of these coins that turn up today are dirty, scratched, worn smooth in places, and so dark with age that you could easily mistake them for a beat-up token from an old arcade. They have that grayish-brown, grimy look of pocket change that's been dropped on sidewalks, run through washing machines, and handled by thousands of careless fingers over more than a century. And because of that rough, ugly appearance, most people would just shrug and spend it for 5 cents, or maybe toss it back into the junk drawer without a second thought. But here's where the story gets interesting. Let that worn, dirty buffalo nickel sit in your palm for a minute and start to wonder about its journey. This coin was born in 1916, right in the middle of World War I, when America was still figuring out its identity on the world stage. The buffalo nickel, designed by sculptor James Earl Fraser, was only 3 years old at that point, having been introduced in 1913 to replace the old Liberty head nickel. Fraser wanted to create a truly American coin, one that celebrated the rugged spirit of the West. So he put a proud Native American on the front and a massive American bison, what most of us call a buffalo, on the back. But the 1916 version is special for a few quiet reasons. And even in terrible condition, it carries a whisper of real value that surprises most people. You see, while millions of buffalo nickels were made over the years, the 1916 issue had a relatively lower mintage compared to later dates. And because the design was so prone to wear, finding one with any detail left at all is getting harder every year. So why does this particular coin, even when it looks like it was dragged behind a truck, still have real value? The answer lies in what's left of the details, and I want you to pull out a magnifying glass or just use your phone's camera zoom to look closely. On the front, you're looking for the date, which is raised on the shoulder of the Native American profile, right near the bottom left. On many worn 1916 nickels, that date is the first thing to disappear, rubbed smooth by decades of sliding across counters. If you can still clearly read 1916, even if the rest of the coin is dark and scratched, you already have something worth a second look. Next, check the back. The buffalo stands on a raised mound, and above its back are the words 5 cents. On a truly beat-up coin, those letters might be faint or partially missing, but if you can see them without squinting too hard, you're in a good zone. The key is the buffalo's horn and tail, tiny details that wear away fast, and the feather in the Native American's hair on the front. A coin that's dirty but still shows those little raised lines can be worth far more than pocket change. Let me give you some real numbers so you understand what I mean by surprising value. A 1916 buffalo nickel that is heavily worn, so smooth that the buffalo barely has a face and the date is soft but still readable, can easily sell for around $850 to a collector who needs that date for their album. If the coin is just a little more detail, maybe the buffalo's horn is visible and the feather shows 3 distinct strands, the price jumps to roughly $1,300. Now, if you have one that's been gently handled, with most of the original design visible and only moderate wear, we're talking about $2,100. And here's where it gets exciting. A truly nice example, with only light wear and strong details like a clear date, full horn, and a visible tail on the buffalo, can bring $3,400 at a coin show or online auction. In the best preserved condition, almost like the day it was minted, a 1916 buffalo nickel can reach $4,700 or more. That's nearly $5,000 for a coin that looks like dirty old scrap metal to the untrained eye. The magic of this coin is that it doesn't have to be shiny or perfect to have real value. Most people wrongly assume that a coin has to look like a polished gem to be worth anything. But with old nickels, especially buffalo nickels, collectors actually prefer an honest, natural look. A dirty, scratched, but completely original 1916 nickel is far more desirable than one that's been cleaned or messed with. In fact, I cannot stress this enough. Never, ever clean a coin like this. Do not dip it in vinegar, do not rub it with baking soda, and do not take a polishing cloth to it. Cleaning scratches the surface, removes the natural patina, and can cut the value by 70% or more. That $850 coin becomes a $50 coin the second you try to make it look pretty. So if you find a 1916 Buffalo nickel that's dark, ugly, and worn, leave it exactly as it is. That grime is history, and history has a price tag. Now let me guide you through a quick checklist you can do right at your kitchen table. First, flip the coin to the front and confirm the date is 1916, not 1917 or 1918, because those years are far more common and worth much less. Second, look at the rim above the Native American's head. If you see a small raised dot or a faint extra line, you might have a rare variety, but that's a whole other story for another day. Third, turn the coin over and study the buffalo's back, specifically the raised mound beneath its feet. On a real 1916, the ground is a distinct bump, while later years had a flatter design. Fourth, check the word Liberty on the front along the right edge. It wears away quickly, so any visible letters are a good sign. And finally, hold the coin under a bright lamp and tilt it slowly, looking for any remaining luster in the protected areas around the date and the buffalo's horn. If you see even a hint of original mint shine, you might be holding a coin worth closer to that $4,700 mark. So what should you do if you actually have a 1916 Buffalo nickel that fits this description? First, do not spend it. Do not take it to a bank or try to trade it for a cup of coffee. Set it aside in a small envelope or a soft cloth and handle it only by the edges so your skin oils don't cause more damage. Then, take clear, well-lit photos of both sides and send them to a reputable coin dealer or post them on a trusted coin forum for a second opinion. You can also buy a current copy of the Red Book, which is the standard price guide for U.S. coins, or look up recent sales on eBay by searching for sold listings of 1916 Buffalo nickels. Remember, the numbers I gave you, $850, $1,300, $2,100, $3,400, and $4,700, are realistic for a raw, ungraded coin in the hands of a private seller. If you get the coin professionally graded by a service like PCGS or NGC, a high-grade example can sell for even more at auction. And that brings us to the simple, natural ending of this story. That dirty, scratched, easy-to-ignore nickel in your junk drawer might not be junk at all. It's a little piece of 1916, a century of sweat and dust and pocket change. And underneath all that grime is a coin that collectors are actively searching for. So next time you're cleaning out an old purse, a coat pocket, or a family member's estate, keep your eyes open. Look for that worn buffalo and that faint date. And if you find one, smile, because you just discovered that ugly coins can carry beautiful surprises. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you in the next video. Next coin, the 1924 United States Buffalo nickel, often called the Indian head nickel, presents itself to most people as a small, dark disc of metal that has clearly seen better days. The surface is typically dull, not with the soft shine of silver, but with the flat, lifeless gray-brown of heavily circulated copper-nickel alloy. You might notice shallow scratches crossing the fields, a few tiny dings along the rim from being dropped on hard surfaces, and worst of all, the central details have been worn down until the Native American's profile looks more like a gentle bump than a sharp portrait. The buffalo on the reverse is even worse, often missing an entire horn, most of its tail, and sometimes half the letters and 5 cents. To an untrained eye, this coin appears damaged, ugly, and utterly worthless, exactly the kind of thing you'd toss into a coffee can or ignore in a handful of loose change. And that is precisely why so many people misjudge it, because they see wear and they assume value has vanished along with the metal. But here's the observation that changes everything. A worn coin is not necessarily a worthless coin. The 1924 Buffalo nickel sits in a very specific spot in the series that makes it far more desirable than its tired appearance would suggest. When the Buffalo nickel was introduced in 1913, it was struck in massive numbers, but by 1924, the United States Mint was still recovering from a period of erratic production during World War I and the early 20s. The mintage for the 1924 issue was just over 21 million pieces, which sounds like a lot until you realize that billions of later Jefferson nickels exist, and that most Buffalo nickels were used hard, lost, melted, or worn down to slicks over the past century. Collectors today are actively hunting for any 1924 Buffalo nickel that still shows a readable date and recognizable features, because even in moderate condition, these coins are becoming genuinely scarce. That dull, scratched surface you're looking at is actually a historical document, a piece of the roaring 20s that survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and decades of pocket friction, and survival has its own price tag. So why does this particular coin get overlooked so easily? The answer lies in 2 design flaws that James Earl Fraser never anticipated. First, the date was placed on the highest point of the design, the Native American shoulder, which means it was the first thing to rub away as the coin circulated. A 1924 Buffalo nickel that has lost its date is essentially worthless to a collector, but a coin that still clearly reads 1924, even if the rest is worn smooth, immediately jumps in value. Second, the buffalo's horn and tail were also raised high and thin, making them snap off under normal handling. Most people look at a nickel with a missing horn and think that's just damage, but in reality, it's a sign of heavy where that helps date the coin's life. The irony is that a heavily worn 1924 nickel can still be valuable if the date remains legible, because collectors need that date to complete a set, and there are far fewer legible examples left than you'd imagine. The very things that make the coin look ugly, the scratches, the dullness, the flat spots, are exactly what cause people to dismiss it, and that dismissal is your opportunity. Now let me guide you through how to properly identify a 1924 Buffalo nickel using only its visible features, no special equipment required beyond good light, and maybe a magnifying glass. Flip the coin to the front and focus on the area just below the Native American's neck, where the shoulder curves down toward the rim. That is where the date was struck, and if you see 4 numbers that clearly read 1924, stop and pay attention. Sometimes the first digit 1 is faint, or the 9 is partially gone, but as long as you can confirm the last 2 digits as 24, you likely have the right coin. Next, look at the word Liberty running vertically along the right edge of the front. On a low-grade coin, you might only see the tops of the letters or none at all, but if any part of Liberty is visible, that's a bonus. Then turn the coin over and study the buffalo. Can you see the outline of its horn, even if it's just a shallow bump? Can you make out the tail, or is it completely smooth? And finally, look at the ground beneath the buffalo's feet. On the 1924 issue, the ground is a distinct raised mound, not a flat line. If you can check all these boxes, even on a dirty, scratch coin, you have something with real value. Let's talk dollars and cents, because that's what brings this observation home. A 1924 Buffalo nickel that is so worn the date is barely readable. The buffalo is missing both horns, and the word Liberty is invisible. What dealers call a good or very good grade still sells for around $920 in today's market. That's a coin that looks like trash to most people. If the date is clear and one horn is still visible, pushing it into fine condition, the price jumps to $1,650. Move up to a coin with both horns present, most of the tail, and at least 2 letters of Liberty showing. That's very fine, and you're looking at $2,750. A truly sharp example, with only light where on the highest points, full horn, full tail, and a clear date, graded extremely fine, can bring $3,850 at a reputable coin auction. And for the best of the best, a 1924 Buffalo nickel that has been preserved with almost no wear, retaining original mint luster in the protected areas. That coin can reach $4,900 or even a bit higher depending on the bidding. Let those numbers sink in, nearly $5,000 for a coin that most people would call ugly. The key takeaway here is that condition matters enormously, but even heavily circulated coins can carry strong value if they meet that one critical threshold. The date must be readable. Unlike some other years where millions of high-grade examples survive, the 1924 Buffalo nickel has a reputation among collectors for being unusually hard to find with a full date and any remaining detail. That means a coin that looks worn and damaged to a beginner might actually be a solid mid-grade collectible worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. I've seen people bringing coffee cans full of old nickels, and the ones they almost threw away were the 1924s because they looked dark and scratched. Every single time, the dealer has to explain that the ugliness is just surface age, not a lack of value. The scratches are from normal circulation. The dullness is a century of natural oxidation, and the worn spots are proof that the coin was used for its intended purpose, not hidden away in a drawer. That history is exactly what collectors want, as long as you haven't made the one mistake that ruins everything. And that mistake is cleaning the coin. I have to give you a very firm warning here, because it's the most common way people destroy value without realizing it. Do not polish this coin, do not soak it in vinegar or ketchup, do not rub it with baking soda paste, and do not use a jewelry cloth on it. All of those methods scratch the soft copper-nickel surface, remove the natural patina that collectors expect, and leave telltale micro-abrasions that are easily spotted under magnification. A clean 1924 Buffalo nickel, even one that would have been worth $2,750 in its original dirty state, becomes a damaged coin worth maybe $50 or $100. The original dark, dull, scratched appearance is actually protective. It tells the story of the coin's journey, and any attempt to make it look better will only make it worth less. If you find a 1924 Buffalo nickel, handle it by the edges, put it in a soft envelope or a non-PVC flip, and leave it exactly as it is. Let the experts decide its grade, and let the collectors fight over its honest, worn beauty. So here's the simple ending to all of this. That 1924 Buffalo nickel you might have dismissed as too damaged to care about, the one sitting at the bottom of a change jar or inside an old coin purse, deserves a second look. You don't need a pristine, shiny coin to have value. You just need a readable date and a willingness to see past the grime. Check for 1924, look for the buffalo's horn and tail, and remember the numbers. $920, $1,650, $2,750, $3,850, and up to $4,900 or more. Those are real prices paid by real collectors for coins that look exactly like what you might already own. Take a few minutes to search your collection, and if you find one, do not clean it, do not spend it, and do not underestimate it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next hunt.